Elon Osborne presents, which basics amp will you get? So tell me, which amp are you gonna get, sir?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna get the A2 because I want to power my front two speakers and also be able to process 11 channels with my 9-channel amplifier, because it can do that if I am externally powering the front two speakers.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you.
You know, your boom mic is probably in the shot.
What? Oh. What about you, sir? Which EMOTIVA BASX amp is right for you?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna get the A3 because I want to power my front soundstage. I got some pretty beefy speakers, so they can take the extra power.
Most definitely. But let's be honest, you don't work out much, huh?
Oh yeah, I just did 1 rep just for this bit.
I see, so you just want the appearance of living a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, it's all just smoke and mirrors.
Even on YouTube, nothing is real.
Hey, did you know your boom mic is probably in the shop?
Yeah, I know. Which BASX amp is right for you, sir?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna get the A4. I've got some real nice speakers in my stereo hi-fi system, and they can be bi-amped, so I'm gonna bi-amp them with the A4.
Oh, bi-amping. Some people swear by it, some people hate it.
You know, your boom mic.
Yeah, I know. I already know. And you, sir, which BASX amp you think you're gonna get?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna get the A7.
Oh.
So I've got a dedicated home theater and 7 ear level speakers. So
Okay.
I wanna power all of them.
Interesting. So it looks like the A5 was overlooked once again. A5 is the loneliest model when it comes to amps.
Don't worry, A5. I choose you. Because honestly, these big ass windows are to the left of my main listening position. So it's actually not feasible to have 7 bed layer speakers in my home theater setup, because I can't exactly put some in-wall speakers in a window. And if I did put some speakers on the left and the right side of my listening position, they would get in the way of some pathways to just get around the living room. So in my situation, the A5 works for me.
Hey everybody, my name is Elon Osborne and this is my YouTube channel where I talk about movies, audio, and music. And if you like those things too, please help support this channel in these fine ways.
Like this video, subscribe, become a patron, rock some merch, get some tunes, read my children's book to you kids.
Link in description. Link in description.
Boy! Just up front, I am not at all being paid by EMOTIVA, but they were kind enough to send me a BASX A5 for this review. So I will be honest with my thoughts on it. With that out of the way, what's in the box? Like any amplifier, it's pretty simple. You have some literature, you have a power cable, you have a 3.5mm patch cable for the trigger, and you have an amp, although it does come wrapped in this nice canvas covering. Ooh, so fancy. The BASX A5 external amplifier delivers 95 watts RMS per channel into 8 ohms, or 130 watts RMS into 4 ohms. And don't forget that power rating is for all channels driven, not just 2. It features a heavy-duty linear power supply, high-quality Class AB amplification, transparent fall protection, and both a trigger input and output, which is great because that allows for daisy chaining more than 1 amp, in case your receiver only has 1 trigger output. I'll go more into detail about that in a minute. It has high-quality unbalanced RCA inputs as well as 5-way speaker terminals that accept banana plugs, spade plugs, or bare wire. EMOTIVA's signature blue light front panel display can be turned on or off with this little switch here. For my international friends, all of EMOTIVA's external amps are designed to operate on either 115 or 230 volts at 50 or 60 hertz, and will automatically detect and configure itself to have the proper line voltage. Auto magical. While I'm on the subject of specs, here's one thing in the fine print that I thought was just a little bit troublesome, which you can see for yourself online. The power rating of 95 watts per channel into 8 ohms is across the entire spectrum of human hearing, 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and a total harmonic distortion rating of less than 0.1%. These numbers are great. That's exactly what you want to see. You want to see it spanning the entire spectrum of human hearing. And you want the unit itself to introduce as little distortion as possible when it is turned on and functioning. Without getting too scientific, bad amps, or even bad microphones for that matter, will introduce their own hum or hiss or distortion of some degree just by being on, which distorts or add flaws to the original audio signal. That's why there are amps that cost hundreds of dollars and amps that cost thousands of dollars. The end goal really is to have the purest, most undistorted audio signal possible, which means more expensive components internally, which ultimately means more money out of your pocket. So back to the A5, its power rating is 130 watts RMS per channel into 4 ohms. But as you can see here, that's only true at 1 kilohertz, not the entire spectrum of human hearing. That's actually not that great, at least not on paper. Plus, the total harmonic distortion is now less than 1%. That's 10 times the amount of harmonic distortion when compared to the 0.1% into 8 ohms. Why should I care about a 4 ohm load anyway? Because most consumer speakers nowadays are 8 ohms nominal. Well, I still am testing out a 5.2.4 system from Aperion Audio, and all of the bed layer speakers are 4 ohm nominal. So I am definitely interested in what this A5 can do with a 4 ohm load. But let's be real, folks. This shouldn't scare probably 99% of you watching this. Because are these numbers and differences even audible to most people? That's gonna be a big fat nope. So let me remind you, this is EMOTIVA's budget-friendly option of getting you into the realm of home theater that surpasses just using your internal AVR amps. And it does that extremely well, especially at this price point. So how does one connect an external amplifier anyway? Well, first you're going to need a receiver with pre-outs, which usually translates to an AVR that's around $1,000 and having at least 9 channels. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using the Denon AVR X4700H that I have on loan. Concerning the physical connections, since the BASX A5 is a 5-channel amp, I want to power my 5 bed layer speakers, front left, center, front right, surround left. Looking at the back of both of these units, I'm going to start with the left front channel.
Side note.
Since these are RCA pre-outs, you can use regular old RCA cables. But if you want minimal distortion between your AVR and amp, I would recommend getting some high quality gold-plated RCA patch cables from Mogami.
Link in description.
Take one RCA patch cable and plug it into the left front pre-out like so. Now plug the other end into the RCA input on one of the ends of the BASX.
Note.
I personally like to spread out my front soundstage amps if possible. So I'll be connecting my front left here, center here, and front right here, and then connect my surrounds in between. I do that for maximum power and heat distribution across the amps, since the surrounds typically don't use or need as much power. Plug in a patch cable into the right front pre-out, plug the other end into the far right RCA input of the BASX, plug in another patch cable into the center channel pre-out, plug the other end into the center RCA input of the BASX, plug the fourth patch cable into the surround left pre-out, the other end goes into either in-between RCA input on the BASX, and the fifth patch cable goes into the surround right pre-out, with the other end going into the last remaining RCA input on the BASX. Lastly, the 4700H and the BASX need to talk to each other. So here's where you take the provided 3.5mm patch cable, plug it into this trigger out port on the 4700H, and plug the other end into the trigger in on the BASX. Now when the 4700H turns on, it will trigger the BASX to turn on as well. Going back to what I said previously, it is awesome that the BASX line of external amplifiers have a trigger in and trigger out, so you can daisy chain more than one amp. Take the Denon X3700H for example. It only has one trigger output. But what if you had more than one amp? Let's say hypothetically you already have a BASX A5 plugged into your X3700H. Well, then you can plug in another 3.5mm patch cable into the BASX A5 trigger output. Then plug the other end into the BASX A4 trigger input in case you want to power 4 height channels, for example. So now you have a total of 9 channels of amplification being processed by one little trigger output on the 3700H. Even more magic. And now that you have an external amp working with your receiver, the actual speaker wires for your left, center, right, surround right will be now going into the amp. And the remaining height channels will still be hooked directly into the receiver here. Apologies for the window reflection, but anywho, on the software side of things, go to speakers, manual setup, amp assign. I know there are many configurations to choose from, but even in my case with only 9 channels, I still want to choose the 11.1 configuration, and you'll see why in just a second. So in order to actually activate the option of having an external amplifier power the front 2 speakers, we do need to actually choose 5-channel and surround back for the floor, as you can see here. Since I am using the Dolby Atmos enabled speakers from Aperion Audio, I do not want any height speakers, I want Dolby speakers. And since I have 4 of them, I want to choose 4-channel like it shows here. And as far as the layout is concerned, I do want front Dolby and surround Dolby, since I don't actually have surround back channels. And as far as the pre-out selection, I do want the front speakers to be assigned to be externally amplified. Once that is done, now we want to go back and go to speaker configuration. So even though the previous screen showed that I had 7 bed layer speakers, now it shows I only have 5 bed layer speakers because surround back is set to none. And that is exactly what I want because I only have 5 bed layer speakers. I totally understand that this is such a bizarre way to get to this point when dealing with only a 5.2.4 system, but this is just the reality. I don't know why Denon set it up this way, but that's how you get it done. But as far as external amplification goes, the act of assigning pre-outs to specific speakers is only necessary when dealing with either the front left and right or the height 2 channels. Otherwise, the pre-outs are just always on, ready for a signal. So assigning the center or assigning my left and right surrounds actually doesn't need to happen because they are just always on, ready to go. How do they sound? When you're getting into this tier of home theater, when you're dealing with pre-outs and external amplifiers, etc., the biggest upgrade you're actually making has to do with power load, power distribution, and processing power. A traditional AVR has to wear so many hats. It is a video signal processor, a video switching device, an audio signal processor, and an audio signal amplifier. And doing all of that at once forces it to limit certain aspects of its functionality. Imagine Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson coming over to move your piano. I'm pretty sure he could do it because he's a beast, but it would be a slow process and he would exhaust himself and overheat pretty quickly. That's how it is with traditional AVRs. Even though the X4700H is a beast on its own, it's still a lot to ask to process so many things and amplify your speakers at the same time. So there will be compromises made along the way that will cause the performance to suffer a bit. But if Dwayne Johnson had the help of the Mountain from Game of Thrones, then obviously moving a piano would be done much more easily. The first scene that I wanted to test out with the A5 was the Battle of Pelennor Fields from Return of the King. Why? Because sonically, there is so much going on across the whole spectrum of human hearing. The thunderous footsteps of the Oliphants, the shouting and many layers of voices you hear, the horse's hooves and breathing, the swords and other metal weapons clashing, the hundreds of arrows flying through the air, the tiny little metal trinkets that people are wearing and fabrics, even the stretching of leather as an arrow is being aimed at its target. And let's not forget the music. So many things going on all at once. And guess what? For the first time ever, I heard all of it. Before external amplification, it was just a very busy scene. Yes, the subwoofer was activated with each footstep of the Oliphants. Swords were clashing, people were shouting, music was in the background, sure. But the Basics A5 just opened up this level of detail that I had never previously experienced. Every layer of audio had its own place now. The shouting was more precise from which direction it came. Arrows, holy shit, the arrows were louder than I've ever heard them before. And the music blared triumphantly in its own little pocket, not just the somewhat subdued presence like it was before. Next up was Avatar, specifically the third act. There are several times in that last battle where the dynamic shifts are just so dramatic. Going from the quieter interior of a ship where the order is given out to fire missiles, to the exterior where those missiles are now exploding, the Na'vi are fleeing in terror, home tree creaking and snapping as it's falling over. So not only were those dynamic shifts between quiet and loud so dramatic now, but again I could hear every layer of audio as everything just seemed to open up. One last test I wanted to feature is my other go-to scene, which is the catacomb shootout in John Wick 2. I'll tell you right now, it wasn't as impressive as Return of the King or Avatar, just because it's not a scene that is on that grand of a scale. But you better believe it was a whole new experience once again. What stood out was the precision and the snap of some of the sound effects. Adding external amplification to that particular scene seemed to speed up the attack and response time to some of those sound effects. What stood out the most were the little details that kind of got lost in the cacophony before. Ricochets were much more prominent. And honestly, even the dirt and the dust flying as a result of the ricochets, I noticed a lot more. But the one thing that I could hear so much better for some reason were the body impacts from John's bullets hitting their targets. Ew. Just every shot he took had this extremely detailed thwack, like a almost like a hit sound effect layered with a slight bone breaking. Kudos to the sound design team, because it did make me a little bit squeamish hearing that so clearly now. So yeah, you could say that I never want to not use external amplification from here on out, sure, because you literally don't know what you're missing until you hear it for yourself. But I do urge you, from this point forward, now that I've heard it in person, don't get too caught up with watts per channel when thinking about external amplification. Think of it more as a means to share the load with your receiver. Cause let's be honest, your AVR needs all the help it can get. And using external amps allows your AVR to breathe, because it can process all those layers of audio so much better now. I'm going back and watching so many movies right now because it's like I'm hearing them for the first time. And there you have it. Are you wanting to break out into this next tier of home theater by getting external amplification? If so, please use the links I provided in the description below so that you can help support this channel. Do you already have external amps? What was your experience like when you made the jump for the first time? Let me know in the comments below. Bottom line is, getting into this tier with external amplification has not been any easier or more affordable since EMOTIVA launched the A2, the A3, A4, A5, and A7. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell. And of course, always be listening.